The message lasted 47 seconds. It was transmitted on every known frequency across the observable galaxy in 312 alien languages simultaneously. No encryption, no distortion, pure, deliberate clarity. And when it finished playing, every space-faring civilization within 1,000 light-years went completely, utterly silent. Because the message wasn't a plea. It wasn't a surrender. It was a warning. To understand what happened next, you have to understand what the Vorath Empire believed about humanity. They believed humans were soft, and honestly, you couldn't blame them for thinking it. When the Vorath first made contact with Earth, nearly 60 years before the transmission, humanity had rolled out something unprecedented in galactic diplomatic history, a welcome. Not a defensive posture, not a military escort, a welcome. They offered trade routes, cultural exchange programs, medical technology freely given to 3 species the Vorath had already conquered and left to rot. Humans built schools on shattered worlds. They sent food to planets experiencing famines caused by Vorath taxation. They filed formal complaints through the Galactic Conclave rather than firing a single shot. The Vorath High Command watched all of this with something between amusement and contempt. Grand Executor Varath Kull, Supreme Military Commander of the Vorath Empire's 47 star systems, reportedly laughed during the first intelligence briefing about Earth. "They comfort their enemies," he said. "What kind of predator comforts its prey?" His generals laughed too. The recording of that laughter would later be broadcast across every Vorath channel. But not by the Vorath, by humans. Here's what the Vorath didn't understand about humanity. Here's what almost nobody understood. Mercy for a human being is not weakness. It is a choice, and choices have prerequisites. You cannot choose to show mercy unless you have already made a more fundamental decision, the decision about what you're capable of. Humans had looked at their own nature, deep in the architecture of their evolutionary history, and they had seen something terrifying staring back at them. And then they had chosen deliberately, consciously, collectively, to keep it caged. The Vorath never thought to ask why the cage existed. They never thought to wonder what was inside it. The Galactic Conclave records from that era describe humanity as a Grade 3 emerging civilization, low threat assessment, high diplomatic utility. 37 member species had voted on that classification. 37 species who had watched humans protest wars, feed strangers, and weep publicly over the deaths of creatures that weren't even their own kind. 37 species who had confused compassion with incapability. There was one dissenting vote. The Eldhari, the oldest living species in the known galaxy. The Eldhari had been spacefaring for longer than most civilizations had possessed written language. They were ancient beyond measure, patient beyond comprehension, and they almost never spoke in open conclave sessions. The Eldhari representative, a being so old that its body had become partially translucent, its organs visible like shadows behind frosted glass, had risen slowly from its seat, and in a voice like grinding tectonic plates it had said 7 words. "Do not wake up when you chose to sleep." Nobody listened. They should have listened. The Vorath invasion of Earth began on a Tuesday. They chose Tuesday because their strategic analysts had determined that human governments were statistically slower to respond at the beginning of a planetary work cycle. The Vorath were thorough like that, meticulous. They had spent 11 years preparing this invasion, mapping Earth's orbital defenses modest by galactic standards, cataloging the human military capable but small, studying human psychology, emotional, tribal, prone to panic. The invasion fleet numbered 4,000 vessels. It was, by any measure, overkill. Grand Executor Varath Kull had insisted on overkill, not because he feared humanity, because he wanted the other species watching, and everyone would be watching, to understand that resistance was pointless. He wanted Earth's fall to be a message. He had no idea that humanity had the same intention. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at 600 hours, Greenwich Mean Time, in a perfect hemisphere formation around Earth's moon. It was a display of military choreography, so precise it was almost artistic. 4,000 warships, gleaming in the light of humanity's sun, arranged in a formation that had broken 30 civilizations before this moment. They expected panic on the human communication channels. What they got was silence. Not the silence of shock. Military analysts aboard the command vessel had studied enough species to know the difference between stunned silence and deliberate silence. This was the kind of silence that had weight to it, structure, intent. The Vorath fleet waited and waited. For 6 minutes and 41 seconds nothing happened. Then Admiral Chen's voice came through on the primary hailing frequency. Calm, almost conversational. The translation algorithms rendered it in perfect Vorath dialect, and the words made Varath Kull's secondary heart, the one the Vorath used for measuring threat response, beat twice in rapid succession. Vorath Fleet, this is Admiral Lin Chen of the Unified Earth Defense Command. We have your vessels targeted. We have been tracking your approach for 9 years. We have been preparing for this specific formation for 4. You have 60 seconds to begin withdrawal, or we will demonstrate what that preparation produced. Varath Kull stared at his tactical display. Earth's orbital defense platforms, 17 of them, publicly registered with the Galactic Conclave, modest armament, mid-range targeting capability, were powering up. 17 platforms against 4,000 ships. He almost admired the courage of it. Lock weapons. Prepare to... Then the moon moved. It didn't move much. Just 0.3 degrees of arc shift, detectable only by instruments sensitive enough to measure gravitational gradients. But there was no natural force that could move a moon 0.3 degrees in 6 seconds, which meant it wasn't moving. Something behind it was. The Vorath tactical system screamed to life as 1,700 new contacts emerged from the lunar shadow, not the registered defense platforms, but something else entirely. Vessels with no conclave registration, no filed schematics, no diplomatic paperwork of any kind, because they weren't diplomatic. They had been built in secret over 40 years, in underground facilities on 6 continents and the deep ocean floors of 3 seas. They had been built by a species that had looked at the galaxy, absorbed 60 years of galactic politics, studied every war the Vorath had ever fought, and quietly, patiently, lovingly designed weapons for the specific purpose of never having to use them. Humanity had called the program the last argument. The ships were beautiful in the way that the most purposefully designed things are always beautiful. Clean lines, no wasted surface area, matte black hulls that drank light, and at the center of each vessel's bow, a weapon that human physicists had spent 3 decades perfecting, something the Vorath had no name for, because nothing in Vorath science had ever conceived of manipulating spacetime at that resolution. Admiral Chen's voice returned, still calm, the way deep water is calm. Grand Executor Varath Kull, I want you to understand something before this goes any further. We know everything about you. We know your fleet compositions, your tactical doctrines, your supply lines, the location of your shipyards, the coordinates of your homeworld, and the personal emergency evacuation route you filed with your own admiralty 3 months ago. A pause, just long enough. We've known about your invasion plan since year 3 of your preparation. We've been building since year 1. We've never wanted this. We've done everything possible to avoid it. We fed your conquered species, we treated their sick, we filed 47 formal conclave complaints that you ignored. Another pause, shorter this time. We showed you every mercy we had, and you called it weakness. The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds. I need you to understand what it means that we are still offering you one more. Inside the Vorath command vessel, the atmosphere had changed in a way that veterans of 30 campaigns couldn't quite name. It wasn't fear. Vorath didn't fear in the way humans feared. Their neurochemistry processed danger differently, faster, colder, more analytical. What they felt was something closer to vertigo, because the tactical display was telling them something that couldn't be true. The human vessels weren't targeting the fleet. They were targeting the fleet's exit vectors. Every possible jump corridor back to Vorith space, every gravitational slingshot point, every safe FTL approach angle within a light hour of Earth. They weren't preparing to fight the Vorith fleet. They were preparing to trap it. 4,000 ships, the finest the Empire had ever assembled. And in the time it had taken Varath Kull to register the new contacts, identify them, and begin processing what they represented, humanity had positioned itself to make sure that not one of those ships could leave. The analytical part of his mind, the cold, calculating part that had won 30 campaigns, finished the tactical assessment and delivered its conclusion with the mechanical certainty of mathematics. If the engagement began, the Vorith fleet would not be defeated. It would be eliminated. All 4,000 ships, every crew member, every soldier, every technician, 40 years of Vorith military investment trapped in the gravity well of a planet that had apparently spent 40 years building the patience to wait for exactly this moment. And humanity was still offering a withdrawal. That was the part that broke something in Varath Kull's understanding of the universe. He had fought 30 species. He had broken civilizations. He had never once, in the aftermath of total tactical dominance, offered the losing side anything except terms of surrender. Humans were offering him a way out, with 1,700 warships at their back. He opened the channel. His voice, translated into the common galactic tongue, was broadcast on every frequency the Vorith fleet used. He was aware that the conclave monitoring stations were recording every word. He was aware that this moment was being watched by every civilization within sensor range. He said, "Why?" And Admiral Chen said, "Because your soldiers have families. Because a war between our species serves no one. Because we have already lost people preparing for this day, and we have no interest in losing more for the sake of pride. And because—" her voice dropped just slightly, just enough, "we want you to go home and tell them what you found here. We want every empire, every warlord, every civilization considering expansion at the cost of someone else's freedom, to hear this story. A beat. We want them to know what's waiting." The Vorith fleet withdrew. 4,000 ships, the greatest military instrument the Empire had ever constructed, turned around in the light of humanity's sun and went home. They left behind them a silence so profound it registered on the Conclave's deep space communications logs as an anomaly. Dozens of monitoring vessels from a dozen different civilizations had been positioned at the system's edge, watching. All of them went quiet at the same moment. The Eldhari representative, monitoring the engagement from a conclave observation post 12 light-years away, said nothing. It simply closed its eyes for a very long time. And then, 48 hours after the withdrawal, Earth broadcast the transmission. 47 seconds, every frequency, 312 languages. It contained no threats, no triumph, no celebration. It contained the complete tactical record of the engagement, every targeting solution, every weapon specification, every capability that had been concealed in the lunar shadow. It showed every conclave member, every independent system, every empire and collective and hive mind within reach of a subspace receiver exactly what humanity had built, and exactly what humanity had chosen not to use. And then at the end, Admiral Chen's voice one final time. Calm, tired maybe. The kind of tired that comes from 40 years of building something you desperately hope to never fire. "We are humanity. We have fed your hungry and mourned your dead and filed your complaints and built your schools and held your hands while your worlds burned and called it diplomacy and called it decency and called it the right thing to do. And we meant all of it. Every single gesture was real. But we need the galaxy to understand something about us. Every hand we extended in peace, We knew what the other hand was capable of. We always knew. We made a choice every single day to keep that hand open. We are still making that choice. Do not make us stop. The galactic record shows that in the 14 years following the transmission, not one conclave member state initiated an unprovoked military engagement against another civilization. Not one. The Vorath Empire restructured its foreign policy within 18 months. Historians still debate how much of that was Admiral Chen and how much was Varath Kull, who reportedly spent the rest of his military career refusing to discuss what he had felt in those 6 minutes and 41 seconds of silence before the moon moved. The Grade 3 classification for humanity was quietly revised. The new classification had no numerical grade. The Conclave Committee assigned to create one sat in session for 11 days and ultimately submitted a single notation in the official record. It read, "Classification pending, see Eldhari Advisory, Ref 7, do not wake what chose to sleep." The Eldhari, when asked to elaborate on the advisory, declined. But one junior diplomat, a young Kethali who had been assigned as the representative's aide, later wrote in her memoirs that she had seen the ancient being watch the transmission in real time, all 47 seconds of it, in complete stillness. And when it ended, she wrote, the Eldhari had done something she had never seen it do in 11 years of service. It smiled. And then, very quietly, more to itself than to anyone present, it had said something in its own language, a language so old that her translation implant could only render it approximately. But approximately, she wrote, it meant, "There they are." Somewhere in the vaults of the Galactic Conclave, the transmission still plays on a loop, not as a record of a battle that never happened, but as a reminder of the most terrifying truth the galaxy ever learned about the species from the small blue world. Humanity's greatest weapon was never the ships in the lunar shadow. It was the 40 years of mercy that made those ships necessary.